So it's 5 after now, and I don't see anybody waiting to get in. So I guess we're ready to get going if everybody else is. So first, I wanted to thank the Northwest Arts Council for doing this tech mentorship thing. And if you're interested in learning more about digital, make sure to reach out and let them know what it is that you want to learn, whether it's in Photoshop or something else. So I wanted to start off by asking who here has Photoshop? Like raise your hand if you have video, or you can type in chat. All right, looks like everybody has. Cool. And how many of you are on Mac? One. All right. And then everybody else is on PC. Cool. So the only reason that that's going to matter is if I ever talk about keyboard shortcuts, which we may or may not get into, there's slightly different between Mac and PC, but it's just, you're just swapping some keys. And I actually put a note in the cheat sheet to help you with that in case I forget to mention it. But before we get too far, I wanted to open it up to you all. I was hoping that you just introduce yourself, like give your name, and then maybe one thing that you wanted to learn from this workshop so that we can kind of get to know one another. Hopefully you'll be more comfortable talking to me and asking me questions. And also so that I can make sure that either I cover it in this workshop, or maybe we'll do a future one to cover more complicated things if you have more complicated questions. So I'm thinking we'll start, we'll go clockwise, starting with, I'm seeing Ginny at the top left under Steph.
Okay, I'm not seeing you.
Oh.
I've lost you somehow.
Okay. What do you have the Zoom meeting open? Can you see the whole Zoom meeting?
Now I do. Okay, now I'm back.
Yay.
Okay. So what was your question?
So I would just like you to state the name that you'd like to go by.
Ginny.
Ginny. And then is there just one thing that you'd like to learn from this workshop?
I'm just looking for possibilities. That's all. Nothing specific. Just, what can I pick up in general?
That's a good response. Cool. Thank you very much. All right, Don.
Hi, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. A very specific thing. I like to remove the glare when I take photos of my oil paintings. I mean, I like to generally be more familiar with it, but that's a specific thing I'd like to know how to do.
All right, sounds good.
Is that possible?
It's possible, though. In this workshop, we're just going to go over the very basics so that we can all get like a foundation under us, and
Right.
then we might do a future one where we could handle something more specific like that.
No worries, that's all right.
All right, and then I see Tim is next.
I'm with Jenny.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I think that's going to be the answer for a lot of people.
Okay.
Cool, thank you. And then looks like Colleen's next.
Hi, it's Colleen. I actually am doing a refresher. It's been a while since I had Photoshop, and then I recently got involved with downloading from the cloud, the entire suite. And I just haven't had a chance to use it. And then as soon as I saw your seminar was coming up, I was like, oh, okay, I have to go and see what Ethan has to say. And I think this is a great opportunity, just for a refresher. So I guess I'm with Ginny, and I'm open to the possibilities. And but I'm really excited about this series. Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for showing up. How about you, Edward? You might be muted.
Ed's not here.
Oh, okay.
So, he could use the help. I'm more familiar with it, but I thought I would just run it and see if there's any tips I could pick up for him.
Sounds good.
Him if he doesn't get here. So.
And what's your name?
My name's Deb.
Deb. All right. Cool. All right. So can everybody see my screen and like my cursor?
No.
Moving around? No?
Nope.
All right. Maybe I'm not screen sharing. That could be the reason.
Yeah, I don't just see you.
There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Sorry, we were playing around before you all got here, and I thought that I had left it up, but I guess I didn't. All right. So the first thing that I want to go over, because we're going to start very basic, is how to open a file, how to start a new file, and then go over like what all the things mean. I encourage you to follow along. That would be really, I think it'd be helpful. So if you need a minute to open Photoshop, let me know.
Yep.
Everyone has it open?
Nope.
Okay. And depending on what version of Photoshop you have, it might look different than mine. In fact, it's pretty likely for it to look different.
Hey, Ethan, is there any way to make it bigger? It's a little small.
To make it bigger.
The words.
Oh, unfortunately not.
Oh, okay.
Let me double check that. You know what? Maybe if I just move it to a different monitor and use that monitor instead, and I just won't use my tablet, that would probably work. So I'm gonna restart the screen share in a second. Hopefully. Well, all right. Apologies. How's that? Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
Much better.
All right, and then I'll move this out of my way. And hopefully the webcam doesn't go with it because it's attached. Oh boy, I really did it now.
Ethan, you need a tech mentorship.
I do. All right, so does everyone have Photoshop open and ready to go?
No, I don't, but go ahead anyway.
Okay. So to get a new document, we're just going to go up here to the left and go up to File, New, and then this window is going to pop up. Yours is going to look different. It might have different things here, but what we're going to look at is on the right here, where it'll give the name of the document. Right now it's just untitled because we're opening a new thing and it's asking. I'm just gonna, I think, I never really do this when I work, but why is that going so slow? I don't know. We'll worry about that later. And then right here, it's just asking for dimensions. We can give the dimensions in different increments. So either we can do like pixels, which is, think of your monitor or any digital device as being like a very densely packed grid. And so this is how big our grid is. We can also do inches, which makes more sense for print. So we could change this to, you know, let's do 11 by, and then 17 for the height. Or we could do it in centimeters, millimeters, points and picas. I'm not really, I never use them. So I'm not, I think they have more to do with like, with printing specifically, but more like book printing kind of stuff. And then we come down here to the resolution, or sometimes it'll be referred to as DPI. That's how dense your grid is. So for every inch, right now I have it set to be 300 pixels. So in an inch, there'd be a grid of 300 squares. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. And I never really mess with this drop down here. Oh, it's just pixels per inch, pixels per centimeter. And so we have two different color modes that we generally stick with, which is RGB or CMYK. RGB is for digital. So on digital things, we're representing, our eyes are seeing light being projected through something, whereas the in print we use CMYK because that's the representation of the different dyes that or inks that that will be printed at the printer or off of your printer. So if you're making a document that is going to be digital, then you're going to want to go with RGB. But if you're going to go with print, you're going to want to go with CMYK. and it should match better to what you're seeing on the screen when you print it out. Any questions about that?
No hurry.
I'm going to make one for RGB since we're working digitally.
I'll be going.
And all of my notes are covered right now. So just a second, let me rearrange this really quick. Make sure that I have my talking points. So I just made an 11 by 17 document. Let's minimize that for a second. Did everyone open a document of whatever size you wanted? All right. This area here, can you see my cursor? It might be kind of small. I wonder if there's a way to do this where it's bigger. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So the white area here is known as the canvas. That's where you can draw, or that's your workspace. And then everything outside of there is just kind of nothing. So if we wanted to zoom in so that we could see this better, we could either, oh, where did it go? Well, I don't know where that thing is in Photoshop right. Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry. I used a lot of different programs and I thought that would be.
Excuse me,
Is that not working?
are we in editing now?
What's that?
Editing, not organizing, right? It's editing. My understanding, there are 3 different workplaces, and at least in my version of Photoshop.
There are.
Video.
There are editing. So there are different like setups for Photoshop. If that's what you're talking about, maybe.
When I bring up Photoshop, it gives me 3 choices.
Okay, and what are those choices?
Organizing or video. I recall that's what it does.
Huh. I don't have those options when I open Photoshop. What version of Photoshop are you using?
It's Elements, first of all. Does that make a difference?
Oh, it's Elements. I think that might be referring to, maybe Elements is more of a broad thing. Maybe it's not only Photoshop stuff. Maybe it also has some of the other Adobe things in it.
Okay.
So you maybe editing.
This looks like editing to me.
Okay, then it would be in editing.
Right. So
the reason that I can't find the zoom feature, oh wait, it's right here. This, if you want to zoom in, you can use this at the bottom of, this is called your toolbar over here on the left. And you can use this magnifying glass. That makes sense. And if you click and drag to the right, it'll zoom in. If you click and drag to the left, it'll zoom out. But what I tend to use is our keyboard shortcuts. So if I hold Control, or if you're on a Mac, Command, and then you hit plus, it'll zoom in, or minus, it'll zoom out. And let me know if I'm going too fast or I'm too chaotic. Can everyone zoom in and zoom out all right?
Yep.
All right. And then once we're zoomed in, it might be difficult to try and figure out how to move around. If you have a scroll wheel, you might have played around with that. You have these side scroll bars here, or this bottom one to go side to side. But the most intuitive way to do it is to hold down spacebar, and it'll bring up this hand. And if we click and drag, it'll move us around as if we're, using a hand and gripping the paper and then pushing it to one side or the other. Any questions about that? Pretty straightforward. Cool. All right, so let's say that we made our document, or maybe you have a picture and you wanna make it smaller. So the first tool that I wanted to talk about is the crop tool, because I figured this would probably come up the most for people. And this is exactly what it sounds like. We would just drag a box, and that would be the size of our new canvas. So if I hit enter, then it would change it to that smaller size. But let's say I messed up for whatever reason. I can go up here and go to edit, undo, and go back to what we started with, the step before. If we wanted to be more specific, we can either up here set dimensions. So if I wanted to, instead of having my 11 by 17, I could do 8.5 by 11, and it'll automatically size it to that size. And then I can move it up and down the document to get to the portion that I would like to cut out. Any questions about that? I don't know what happened there. All right. So next we'll talk about brushes, and brushes are what we're going to be using to make any marks on the paper, on the canvas. And so we can access that here on the toolbar. It's about 8 down. It's right below this Band-Aid looking icon, little paintbrush. And we can use this to make the, sorry? Does somebody have a question?
Hello?
Oh, he's taking a phone call.
I'll just mute them real quick. All right, so so we can use this line tool to make lines and draw whatever it is that you'd like, or sometimes you can use this to touch up things or whatever. But just for the basics, we're just drawing around, and I would recommend like playing around with it. There's a lot more brushes than just whatever is standard, and the way that you access those is on the right hand side. You should have these little brush icons here, and if you open it up, it should give you options. The standard Photoshop should come with brushes that are kind of like this, but there's a lot of different options, a lot of different ways of getting new brushes, but that's something that we would cover in another tutorial. But I would encourage you to maybe open it up and play around with it, and maybe draw some things. You can also play with the size of the brush by clicking this drop-down menu up here at the top left, and you can just use this slider to make it bigger or smaller. But if you don't want to use that, you can use the square bracket keys on your keyboard. The bracket that looks like this will make it smaller, and the bracket that looks like this will make it bigger. Do we have any questions about that? All right. If you find yourself, like let's say that we wanted to draw over this, but we didn't really want, we weren't really sure what we wanted to do. So we want to make sure that we can easily go back on whatever it is we want to do or edit it. We can go to down here where we have our layers, and we can hit this little button that looks like a page turning up, maybe. It's a little square with a triangle in the corner. And if we hit that, you'll see that down here, we have now created this layer 1. We all see that?
I have a quick question for everyone.
Sure.
Is anyone else, are the videos of the other people covering that side of the screen for
That's
you?
a good question.
Because it is for me. So I think if you take that black bar at the top of all the videos and drag it to the bottom and let it go, you can put the videos at the bottom instead. Did that work for you all? Or is it still covering the side?
Can you say
you
that
can
again,
access
Steph?
with the view.
Okay,
You
got
just
it.
You can just see, you can minimize the heads basically.
Oh, you minimized the heads? Yep.
Just
You can, yep.
dragging it
You can
to
hide it too. Yep.
the tops of their heads.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, the little minus sign, hide thumbnail view. That way you can see the whole screen.
So everybody, good thing you're here, Steph, because I never would have even known.
Yep.
So everyone can see the layers over here. We're good. Cool. So imagine this as like a clear piece of paper, if we're talking more traditional, that we're laying over the top of the layer below it, a different piece of paper that's below it, our canvas. And so we can draw over this. And then we can easily turn that off with this little eyeball or turn it back on. Or if we wanted to erase, we can come over here to our eraser tool, select that, and then we can erase only what's on that layer when we're selecting that layer, when we have that layer highlighted, right? And so if I click on this lower layer, then I'll only be erasing from that lower layer.
Ethan, I have a question.
Sure.
If I wanted to make it so it's not all blurry around the edge, how do I do that?
So it's a little bit more complicated. For now, I would say to click on another brush that it'll give you the preview of the brush and see how this one on the left is fuzzy and this one has a hard edge to it. I'm going to click the hard edge one and I'm still on my eraser. 1 second. And now it's a hard edge.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. All right. And then, so say that we were working on our second layer and we wanted to change our color. We can click on this, this box here. This is where we have two different colors, but we'll cover this in a second. So we have one color, and then we use this little color square, the color picker, to find whatever color we'd like. Up at the top right is going to be the most saturated, so the highest ratio of that color, and then all the way at the bottom left is going to be the least saturated, so it'll be more gray. And then towards the bottom right is the darkest value. The top left is the lightest value. It's not a perfect scale here, and you'll get used to picking it because I know that it's a little tricky to begin with, but you'll get used to it. And then if you want to change the base color that you're dealing with, that's this slider right here. So let's go with like a nice purpley kind of color, and we'll go kind of saturated, and we can draw with that on our new layer. But let's say that we wanted to change the color that we're working with, but we kind of wanted to save this one for a minute. We can click this little switch arrow thing. It looks like a right angle maybe with two arrows on either end, an arrow on either end, and we can switch that. And now our foreground color is white, which means that we are drawing with that white color. All right.
I just had a question. Can you,
Sure.
RGB, what is it to the 4 colors anytime? Can you switch back and forth?
So if you switch between RGB and CMYK, is that what you're asking? Photoshop technically does that, though I've heard that there are some errors that happen. I haven't had that problem myself, but sometimes Photoshop will get a little funky with that. So it's better to just start the document with however you want it to go. And then if you wanted to do something that was digital and printed, I would probably stick with the CMYK and then just play around with it until it worked for RGB, so for digital stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so I covered foreground, background. Oh, if you wanted to switch between your foreground and background color very quickly, if you wanted to make digital art, this comes up all the time. You can hit the X key and it'll switch to foreground or background color. It'll switch to the opposite color. If you're not comfortable with picking the colors that you wanted to use, there are little swatches that Photoshop has pre-selected for you if that's of interest to you. if we wanted, say that you know, we were going along and we changed our color and we kept going, and then I'm like, oh, I want that purple color. We can use what's known as the eyedropper tool, which is located right there. And we can click that purple, and all of a sudden the color that we had selected is now purple. And then we can go back to our brush and start drawing again.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you blend colors like you could with oil paints? Can you blend them?
You can with a special brush tool. Here, it's called the mixer brush. And I'll probably have to zoom in. Actually, I could just make the brush bigger. So I'll make the brush really big. And you can see that it kind of like smudges.
Yeah.
I don't use this brush as much. I know I have some friends that have, and they really like it. I haven't really taken the time to figure out exactly how it works. But
which one?
So all of these tools have other tools underneath them. So if you click and hold, you'll see this menu come up, and it's called the mixer brush.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But for now, I'm just going to stick with the regular brush.
When they were painting with digital, you'd use the mixer brush.
Yep, definitely. And then, so if you wanted to blend, but well, I guess I shouldn't necessarily say that, but say that we wanted to have the bottom layer show through a little bit, we could go over here to our opacity and just lower that and make that that layer kind of disappear. You can do this with images too. Obviously, all of these things with images. But I'm trying to give you like the basics so that then you can apply this to whatever project it is that you are working on. Whether that's making artwork completely within Photoshop or editing a photo or whatever it is. All right. And you can also change the opacity of your brush if you wanted to up here. So that purple then becomes this kind of light pink. And if I keep going over it, it'll eventually build up to the same color as before. All right. Let's see. Also, if you ever want to draw straight lines in Photoshop, if you hold down Shift, it'll make a perfectly straight line, either horizontal, vertical, or if you want to make a straight line between 2 points, you would click with your brush and then click in another location, and it'll draw a straight line between them. And you can just keep going. And that works for this tool, or if you're experimenting with another tool and you wanted to make a straight line, that would be a way that you might be able to do it. All right. And then let's say that I didn't really like what I did on this layer. So we can come over here and just click delete, and it'll get rid of the whole layer. But if we wanted to keep that layer, we could use our selection tool to select the whole layer. So up here, we have the marquee selection tool, is what it's called. And we can highlight either a portion and then hit delete, and we can get rid of a portion of our canvas, or we could use it to select the whole thing and delete, and it'll basically clear that layer. Whenever you're curious if you have something selected or not, you can always look for this dotted white and black line that we call the marching ants. It's just a way for us to see our selection. And then you can add to that selection by holding Shift and then using that same tool. Well, using any selection tool. And to get to deselect certain portions, you can hold Alt and use the selection tool and get rid of some. We can also use that. We can also use this move tool once we have something selected to pick it up and move it to a new location if we wanted to. or we could move it. We could change the size if we wanted to. If we wanted to go to edit and then transform, and then we could either do scale, so we could change the size of it, or we could.
Would you repeat that process,
Sure.
the steps there, please, one more time?
Yeah, no problem. So if we wanted to change the scale, we could go to edit, transform, and then we can click scale. Though I'm going to be honest, the way that I normally do this, which may or maybe more helpful or less helpful depending on you and how comfortable you are, is I use a keyboard shortcut that kind of allows you to do multiple things, which sounds more complicated, but I actually think in this situation it's easier. So if you hit Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and T, if you hold them down at the same time, it'll allow you to transform whatever you have selected. So you can make it bigger, make it smaller. But the reason that I like this one better is because if you hover just outside of the corner, it'll give you this this arrow that looks kind of curved, right? With this line, this curved line with arrows on either side. And you can use that to rotate. And let's say that we wanted to just rotate it, 90 degrees exactly. We can, again, use Shift, and it'll go in increments of 15 degrees or 45 degrees, depending on your version of Photoshop. And we could just spin it upside down if we wanted to. All right. We can also use the selection tool. Let's clear some of this out because it's getting to be a bit much. And let's not fill with purple. That'd be a bit obnoxious. So we'll go with white. All right. So let's say that we scribbled around. We were drawing or working on. Whenever I use the brush tool, it can apply to pretty much any other tool, which is why I want to start with the brush because it's nice and basic for understanding what we're doing. And let's say that we wanted to. Let's say that we wanted to preserve most of it, but we wanted to change something in here. So we can go up to our marquee selection tool again, and we can draw a box around it. And now when I use my brush, I'll change the color so that it's obvious, more obvious. I can draw within this area, right? But I can't go outside of it. So sometimes that's a good way to control what it is that you're editing or what it is that you're trying to create without bumping into other things. Photoshop has more complicated tools for that, but for now, we're going to leave it there. But let's say that we wanted to only affect this red line here. This is a little bit more complicated, but where is the magic wand tool? Right here. We can use what's called the magic wand tool, and we can click on a color, and it'll select all of that color, as long as, but only that exact color. We can mess with the tolerance up here, which is how close in tone and color a thing needs to be for this tool to select it. Does that make sense? So right now it'll only select like this red and then like one shade on either side of it, or maybe two shades on either side of it. But if we put it up to 32 and I select it, you can see that it selected a little bit more of that line because the line is still a little bit fuzzy. Does that make sense? I know this one's a little bit tricky, but I figured it'd be pretty helpful to know about the magic wand tool. We're all good with that? Makes sense? And we can also use the Shift to add this purple if we wanted to, or Alt or Option on a Mac to deselect the purple again. All right. And we can also use the selection. Actually, we'll do it this way. I'll talk about the gradient tool. So, or not, paint bucket tool. So I think we're all familiar with the paint bucket tool, at least in theory. If not, this is how you add very large swaths of color to your image. So if I click anywhere, it's going to fill anything that that is connected to any pixels that are connected to the pixels that I click that are related. So if I click in this white area, it will fill anything that was white, but it won't go like underneath any other lines, any other pixels. So you see that I have this sectioned off here with this red, so it won't go into that area there. Does that make sense? And we can also use the selection tool to similarly fill that area, or to avoid filling areas that we don't want, like that.
Ethan, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What if you want to fill the whole background at once?
So the whole background at once, that would be edit and fill. And it'll bring up this little dialog box. And if this drop-down menu doesn't say foreground color, you would just change it to that and then hit OK. Alternatively, because I know dialog boxes, I know when I see them, I get a little anxious if I don't know what it is that I'm doing exactly, especially when I'm still trying to get my feet under me. You can use the shortcut Alt and backspace, and it'll fill with your foreground color.
What if I don't want to cover over my drawing with the color? What if I want to fill the whole background?
Oh, underneath?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, we're not really set up to do that. But what we would do is, ideally, in an ideal world, we would have done this red on another layer on top, right? So I'm just going to scribble roughly.
Isn't there some instruction where you can move something back?
You're thinking of Illustrator, which is a different kind of program.
Good luck if I am. But okay, so in Photoshop, there's no way to say I want this green, but to do what Steph said, but I want it to go under everything. There's no way to do that.
There is with using layers. So what we would do is, so one of these red lines is actually, for ease, I'm making this a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. So I'm going to undo that. We're going to use this blue, and this blue is on top, right? And then let's say that we wanted to put this on this green field, or we'll use red because the green's going to blend in. Then what we would do is we would click this bottom layer or any layer underneath the layer with the line on it, and we would click this new layer button. And then we can use our Alt backspace. Actually, first, let's use Alt and use our eyedropper tool by holding Alt and click this green, and then Alt and backspace to fill that whole layer.
Yeah.
But let's say for whatever reason, we wanted, let's erase a little bit out of this so that my next thing is going to make sense.
That's looking good.
Thanks.
You got to sign it first, though.
Oh, I will. Don't you worry. I'm just going to put a white layer here. All right. So let's say that for whatever reason, we decided that this green, it should really be on top of that blue line. So what we would do is we would just drag the layer in this menu over here to be on top of that line layer. Does that make sense? I think that's what you were asking.
Yeah, I'll tell you why, Matt. I do a lot of stuff with Vistaprint, which is sort of a primitive Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at least one of the commands, if I want to take a rectangular color and I want to send it all the way back, that's a command I can use in Vistaprint, and it will send it all the way below everything else I've got on the card. I suppose it's an art card I'm making up. And I just would think that, I think probably what you described is the way you do it in Photoshop, but in Vistaprint is pretty simple.
So something that I meant to go over in the beginning, but I forgot, is there are two different kinds of art programs. There's Vector, which is what I think what you're talking about, which is more of a calculation of a shape or a line or a color. And it behaves a little bit differently. You'd be able to select, say, like this green and this blue, and move them around, change their shapes. And because it's a calculation, it would resize very easily. However, Photoshop is known as a raster program, which means that our document is made up of a bunch of little squares, which is our resolution, right? And so what we're doing in Photoshop is just filling in different squares with color, basically, or erasing those little squares of color to get a transparent.
But in the vector, you're putting the layers down, basically. Is that it?
In Vector, each thing that you put down is something that you can like move and change and alter, but it's a little bit less intuitive, especially when you're drawing or painting, or if you're trying to do photo editing or anything like that. It wouldn't really work so well.
You see that? Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so where were we? Talked about the selections. Oh, all right, so there's, within this, I have all the tools on because I reset my Photoshop before this so that it would look more like what you would be seeing. So you can click down on the marquee tool and you can get a circular elliptical marquee tool. If you wanted to do a circular selection, you can again hit Alt to deselect or Shift to add a selection. And it works the same way, or we can draw on it and not draw outside of it. Another selection tool that we have at our disposal is called the lasso tool. And this is if you're trying to do more specific selection or maybe make a specific shape. So if I just wanted to make that selection and maybe I want to fill that with this red. Ooh, that's tough on the eyes. Maybe we'll fill it with that white. Or if I wanted to, draw on that selection. And then the lasso tool works the same way in that you can use Alt to deselect or Shift to add. So if I wanted to trace something specifically, the lasso tool is what I would use. It's a little time consuming, but it'll get the job done. Is there any questions about any of the selection tools? All right.
We have a question in the chat, Ethan.
Oh,
actually.
Yes.
Is there a way to make a perfect circle with the ellipse tool?
Ah, good question. Yes, there is. So when you're dragging a circle out, you can hold Shift and it'll make it perfectly circle. If you're using, this also works for the rectangular marquee tool in that it'll make a perfect square. And actually, oh no, never mind. I'm thinking of a different program. We're good. All right. There's something else that that reminded me of, but I don't remember. I see that we have a chat there. All right, that worked. Cool. Glad that helped. So now we also have what's known as the shape tool that I just wanted to touch on. Where did that go? I hardly ever use it. Why am I blanking on this? What's happening?
Is it under the clone stamp?
Is it? No.
Nope.
Is it just not showing? I usually use this for like obviously making digital art with just using brushes and stuff. So I hardly ever use the shape tool. Oh, here it is. It's the line tool. Okay. So these are going to work a little bit closer to what you were talking about, Don, where we can make a square, and then we can easily select that square and move it. But let's see, 1 second. So right now, so up here at the top left, there's a couple different modes for doing this. And I know that it's making things a little bit more complicated, but in order for it to work in certain ways, you might get frustrated if you don't know about this, basically is why I'm bringing it up. So right now I have it set to pixels. So it acts more like if we're using a brush tool, or it works in that way where I was talking about, where it fills in the grid, basically. So if I do this, it's going to just add on to that, and we can move that around and easily edit it. If we wanted to, we can select our eraser, which we can just click E on the keyboard to select the eraser, and we can erase it. However, if instead I select the shape tool and it's set to shape, and I make a square, we can easily move it, but our eraser tool is not going to work because it's known as a smart object. Basically, Photoshop doesn't know how to manipulate that how to like cut into it or anything. It's not just pixels anymore. It's like a calculated shape. Your computer knows that there's a square there and it fills it in, basically. So the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because if you're using your shape tool and that happens to you, but you want it to be pixels, it might be kind of frustrating to be like, oh, I can't erase it, I can't select it, I don't know what's going on. Hang on, let me move this alert to this screen. So if I like try to, so it's going to bring up this thing, and it's going to say the shape layer must be rasterized before proceeding. So basically turned into those pixels. And if you just hit OK, it'll automatically do it. But if you wanted to do it otherwise, because you might have other smart objects and your version of Photoshop might not automatically do it, you can just right click on the layer. And I know this might be intimidating to open up the layer and have this huge menu pop up, but right here, kind of a little bit above the middle, you'll see rasterized layer, which just means that you want Photoshop to turn it into pixels so you can edit it more easily. And so we'll just click that. And then if we hit E, we can then erase.
I just have to say that took me so long to learn that. And I did get very frustrated because I didn't know that. And it happens too if you try to put a picture onto a Photoshop document. You have to rasterize it before you can edit the picture sometimes. So I will agree with you, Ethan, that that can be a very frustrating thing. Very important.
Yeah, I remember when I started with Photoshop, it didn't automatically tell you how to rasterize it. It was just like it's not a raster object, so you can't erase it, and it drove me nuts.
Yep.
And while we're talking about shapes and raster, rasterizing things, I did want to go over the text tool because it works a little bit. It might be a little bit confusing. So if we come down here to this T, we can select the text tool, and we can either just click, and mine is set to automatically fill so I can see the size and the font that I'm currently on. Yours may or may not, but it'll come up with like a cursor, and then we can just type and it's fine. And then in order to get out of this, we need to hit this white check mark up here at the top, and then that'll set the text. Then we can use our move tool and we can move it around. But you can see down here that it made a new layer for us above the layer that we were working on. And you can't like erase the text or, alter it too much because it isn't rasterized, because in order for it to be text, it needs to be closer to the vector style if that makes sense. You can think about it as a vector object instead, so that you can come back in and you can edit it or, add to it, edit it however you'd like. You can change the color of it up here. Though if you already have the text down, you need to select, and then we can change it to black or white, or, we can change it to any color of the rainbow. We can adjust the font size here. We can even type in our own font size if we'd like, and we can change our fonts here to whatever we'd like. But let's say that we wanted to do something like edit these letters afterwards. We would need to come over here and rasterize type the same. It's very similar to what we did with the square. But once you do rasterize it, then you can't edit the text in the way that we were just doing again. Does that make sense? So you can't go back once you've rasterized it. So make sure that you have your text the way that you want it before you go messing with it.
Why do you want to rasterize the text?
So if you ever wanted to like make an edit to the text, right? So let's say that instead of it being like the title of a brochure or something that you're trying to make, or poster or whatever, maybe you just like the shape of this. I don't even know if it's a D or what, honestly. But let's say that you just liked that shape and you wanted to use that in a composition. You can Control T, maybe make it a little bit bigger. And then we can deselect. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you how to deselect things, because that would probably drive you nuts too. Command or Control D will deselect any selection that you have. So if you have marching ants on your image, and you want to get rid of them, just hit Control or Command D if you're on a Mac. And then let's say that we wanted to erase parts of it for whatever design that you wanted to do, right? And maybe you like that.
Ethan, I just want to let you know we're 3 minutes of 5.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see if there's any questions.
Good call. Yeah. I was just going to go over the file types real quick.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So when we say that we wanted to save this masterpiece, we would go up here to File, Save, and then it'll bring up this thing, and you find wherever you want to go, and you name it here, and then you can either save it as a Photoshop document, JPEG, PNG, TIFF, or even a PDF, which is why am I not seeing this? I'm having stage fright right now. Here we go, right here. And so the reason that you might want to save it as any of these files is sometimes when you're submitting things, you need to make the file size smaller, or maybe you only need the flat file for it. The Photoshop document, the .psd, is going to save all of your layers that you have over here, so you can work on it in the future. It'll also make sure that like the text stays the same and all that. Though if you go to a new computer that doesn't have that font, you might run into issues, or you will run into issues 100%. The standard for like submitting things would be either PNG or JPEG. So JPEG here or PNG, and those kind of make the file smaller, and it makes it completely flat, so you won't have any layers. You can't really edit it too much. PDF kind of locks it because you can only edit PDFs in certain programs, and it also keeps the file size pretty small. But generally, you'll save in either PNG or JPEG or PSD, really, if you're making digital art. If you're sending it to somebody, I would recommend either PNG or JPEG or PDF, I suppose. JPEG is like the smallest, but the problem with JPEG is that every time that you save it, you actually degrade the image a little bit. So it'll become more like fuzzy, a little bit, the colors might be a little bit off. And the more that you save it, so over like hundreds of times that you save it, it would get very pixelated. Whereas a PNG or PDF doesn't have that problem. But the only downside is that, you know, JPEG is the smallest and the other ones take up a little bit more space. All right. And I think now is, now we can be open for questions. I know I spat a lot of information at you all at once, but hopefully not too quick. So does anyone have any questions?
If we were going to do another workshop like this, is there anything else that you would like to talk about? In addition to like maybe editing pictures of artwork, photographs of the artwork? Are there any more requests? In the chat, Kathleen said, requires a project to learn.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you going to be uploading this session somewhere?
Yep. Yep. We're going to put this on YouTube afterwards. So if you need to go back and you want to remember any specific thing Ethan went over, you'll be able to go back and find the place where he did it.
And most of the stuff that I touched on should be in that digital cheat sheet that I provided as well.
Where do we find that?
It should be in the chat. There's the link to my website, and then right after that is a long link that you'll be able to click. And there are 3 different versions of it to make sure that it works on your computer. So if one doesn't work, then try another one.
Can you see the chat on the side? If you can't see the chat, I think you have to click on the bottom. There's a little speech bubble that says chat, and then that'll pop up.
Well, right now I have the faces along the bottom.
Oh, okay. If you click on the faces on,
He just moves them up, Steph. She sees the chat.
yep, on there's a black bar on the side you can grab and move it.
I've got it.
And then you might have to scroll all the way to the beginning of the chat to see the link. It's a long link with a lot of numbers and letters in it.
Okay, I think I have it.
Cool.
Great.
So yeah, is there anything that anybody would like more specific workshop on?
So like I said, and Steph mentioned, I'd be interested in ways to edit photos.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good.
Someone once told me how to take a photo of something under glass and use Photoshop to make it look normal. To me, that's a lot of work. Actually, I'd rather just unframe it. But I don't know if that's easy or not to do.
I suppose it depends on what it is that's framed, I guess.
Well, you had to turn off the lights and sit sideways. I mean, it was
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
to take it out of the glass, you know.
Yeah, that's a pain.
But in all seriousness, what I mentioned earlier, any ways to improve, you know, images you're sending for jurying.
Right. I know that there's people that do edit in Photoshop their images that they take of their pieces.
I do.
Do you?
Yep.
All right, cool.
And we're also offering a smartphone workshop coming up soon. We're going to have a photographer available. If you want to sign up, you can bring a couple pieces of your own artwork, and then she'll show you how to take a really good picture of it with your smartphone, and then what apps you can use to color correct it and stuff.
Would that include oils, Steph?
Sure, yeah.
Because I find those really tough to take pictures of.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, are they glossy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, it's a practice in itself. You know,
I
good
find myself going around the driveway trying to find the right angle for the sun.
Yeah.
And I never learned that in art school, you know, so.
Have you tried doing it in the shade?
Yeah, but that's actually the reason I'm bringing it up, because then it's too dark, you know,
Mm,
and I need to bring the colors back. But it,
That's one thing you can do in Photoshop is brighten up darkness.
well, they have to be true to what I did, obviously.
right, that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Yep. It is a practice.
So I'll be first in line if you can do that for me.
Great.
Sounds good.
Did you guys enjoy the session? Would you recommend it to a friend?
Yes, thank you so much, Ethan. Really.
Thank you.
No problem. I feel like I threw a lot of things at you, and I didn't realize how fast the time went, but you stuck it out, and I thank you for that. All right.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. And, you know, if you have any feedback for us, or if you get any ideas in the future of some workshop you'd like us to put on, just feel free to reach out, call, email. We're in the office every weekday, so stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you very much for arranging it. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks, Steph.
Yeah. Thank you, Ethan.
No problem.
And we'll keep you posted about future workshops as well.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Happy Friday. Have a great night.